OCO. I'm Cathy Abercrombie. I am a Cherokee National Treasure for Cherokee Loom Weaving. I know these people know weaving. Do you know weaving and looms? Are you familiar at all? Okay, that tells me where to start. This is my granny. This is my Granny Pearl, and what makes my weaving a little bit unique are the looms that I use. And these looms were made at Sequoia Orphan Training School in the 1930s. So like we have FFA classes and shop classes now where they make trailers and furniture and things like that. At the orphan school, they had high school students, and John Ketcher was one. He was 17, and so they made these looms. It was a BIA, a Cherokee Nation program. They made about 40 of these. And these looms are oak and iron. They're 60 inches wide, and it does take 4 men to lift them. They're solid oak and iron. They are heavy. You don't move them. They had 7 looms at Oak Hill, and Oak Hill was just outside of Jay. That was our community building. That's where I learned to weave. My grandparents and their 9 children, including our daddy, lived there as the caretakers of the big community building with the looms, and then the other people in the area, would come and weave. And it wasn't just a weaving hall, it was a true community. I have a register from the late 50s, and even though there were 7 looms, over 50 people in the community would come to weave. And they would, they need grocery money, they would come and weave a rug, and they would get paid immediately. And I still have the ledger books where they would pay for their yarn, and they would get paid by the feet for their weaving. And, if you needed to borrow money, and they kept it all on the ledger. So it was a true community. They wove there for about 40 years, and then actually the weavers got evicted, a whole political thing, but only our 2 looms were saved. The others, we don't know what happened to them. The reason there aren't a lot of weavers most people don't have an extra building to put looms in. So back in the 1800s, you would have 1 weaver in town, and it would be or a loom in your barn, but there would only be 1 weaver. And that's the struggle that we've had as Cherokee weavers. No one has the area to put the looms up in. So my family built an addition onto my aunt's house to keep these 2, and we wove on these until Grady passed away. And then I inherited them, moved them to Missouri, and built a weaving hall. And 7 years ago, I moved back, so I'm getting ready to build another weaving hall. So this is what I still weave on. I still make everything on these 2 looms. I don't have daughters. I have 3 sons. All my sons are award-winning weavers. They have worked in museums and private commissions, and now my grandchildren. So if you watch OCO TV and you pull me up, that's me on there with my grandbabies where they're learning how to weave. So they won their first awards at the last show. They won Chief's Choice pre-program. So now we have 5 generations on these looms. So what I make, and this is a warping wheel. This is very unique. You can see this. Most warp wheels, which is what you put your warp on, are about 2 foot in diameter. And this one's 6 feet in diameter and takes up about 12 feet of floor space. Again, why we don't have very many weavers. Most people can't afford to build a building just for the looms. The way weaving starts out, we start out by designing, and I still use crayons to design with. You will spin your warp. So this is the warp. It's going this way, and this is what holds everything tight. So at home, you would spin it all out on a warp wheel, and you spin it out for your directions, but this is what gets your tension straight. This is why this is so important. Everything goes on in a bundle. So when you weave, everything is going to be even and straight. Your tension's going to be straight across here. From here, you would tie it onto the back beam of the loom. Back here, you're going to roll it up, and see how that you have a tightener. All of them are going to have a break. And come through. This is a threading hook. So this is a 4 harness loom. I only have 2 threaded for simplicity, but this is a 4 harness. So you see how every lever brings up a different one. So when I lift 3, it's going to pull up every other thread that's run through the 3, and then the 4. So on my looms, mine are foot pedals there, and so everything is lifted, and I have a 4 harness, and they're double tied. So pedal 1 is going to lift 1 and 3, and then you go through, and that's how you make the complicated designs like the diamond weave. So this is how we get the diamond weave going through. Once you thread them through here, then you thread them through this, and on my blankets, there's a little over 1,000 threads. And people ask me how long it takes to weave a blanket. It takes 11 hours to weave one, but it takes 11 hours to thread the loom. It's exactly the same amount of hours. And if you get those 1,000 threads through there and you get it all tied up and there's one missed here in the middle, you have to take out all of them to fix one. So there's a lot of the hours right there. You bring them forward, you tie them to the front, and you'll see this one has a break here. And all looms are going to have a front and a back break. So this one's here. And this one's pretty simple to tighten it up. Now, this is what we call, this is the weft. So we've got warp going this way. This is the weft. Ordinarily, you would use a shuttle or you would use a board. Somewhere between Grand Lake and here, I've lost my board. So my daddy would call this ingenuity. Well, this is how we fix things. So this is going to be my weaving board. So, oh, this is fun. I think we just broke the loom. We may have to repair. We just broke a string. Okay, we're gonna do it manually then. We're just gonna this just keeps getting better. So if you see this is locked in, and then it's locked in, it won't go. So then when you change and you lift the other one, it's gonna open this. So see how it opens the weave? We're gonna lock it back down. And this is the beater. This packs it down. And then we're going to go back through the opposite way. So this is what's called a plain weave. And you're simply going every other thread. So if you imagine your fingers like this, and they're just going to, and it's not that different. Like a basket weaver is not that different than basket weaving, the over and under. But when you get 4, or you can even get 8 harnesses, then you can really get into complex weaves. So Oak Hill started in 1939 is when they set up. And the very first year, they used wool from Navajo Nation, hand-spun wool. After that, they went to commercial wool. Mostly they made blankets and shawls. But in the 50s, they had a contract with some suit designers in New York, and they would weave fabric. And I think that's pretty cool because Oak Hill is a tiny little community. Most people don't know where it's at. And they were weaving yardage for suit makers in New York. And for them to even get that contract and to be able to be out into the world like that. But then about the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, they went to Orlon, which was before acrylic. Then acrylic came out. And everything went to acrylic then. Everything, it was less expensive. It was bright colors, easily accessible. And when I got my loom, so when I came along, I started weaving in 70. So I was 8 years old. I'm 61. I've been doing this a while. I should know what I'm doing. But when I came along, all they used was Red Heart yarn, like you see at Walmart right now. The acrylic yarn, that's all I've known. And then when I inherited the looms and started weaving again, I only wear natural fibers. So I wanted to go back to natural fibers. And I found a letter from the BIA. Mr. William Ames was the buyer from BIA. He would go to all the different weaving halls and buy their hand wovens and then, resell them in a shop. And there is a letter to my granny, and it says, Mrs. Abercrombie, we understand that you still want to use wool, but no one will pay $38 for a wool blanket. So now I get tickled every time I sell $2,000, $2,500 blanket, I want to go, hey, Granny, they will. Yeah. So I went back to wool in honor of my granny's honoriness, I guess. I get to carry that forward, her stubbornness. So mostly what I weave with now are natural fibers. Occasionally I play in some of the fun new stuff, but usually I use natural fibers. What I'm using here is cotton. This is a cotton twist. This is a cotton chenille. But 90% of my weaving is wool. And I like to... It took me 3 years to find a wool that I was happy with, and I will only use that I buy from a place in Maine. It's all American made. Even the sheep raised, everything's processed. So this is a shawl, and I call these my voluptuous shawls. Most of the shawls I make are basic. They're about 22 by 76, which is a standard shawl. These are 30 by 100. So for tall or curvy ladies, they really wrap around. This is a 4-harness chevron design. And if you look at denim, all denim is still made this exact same way. If you look at a pair of jeans real close, it will have this herringbone or chevron because it's the strongest structure that you can weave. So they're just made on big industrial machines with the very same stitch. This ombre was designed by a customer, and I think I can say Ms. Kimty designed this. She wanted an ombre, so we started out with this. Then she wanted a gray one, so we wove it with gray, and Christine wanted a black one, so we wove a second one with black, and it makes a totally different looking shawl. You don't even notice unless you look at the fringe. It's so subtle on the differences. So this is a mulberry. And the new thing I've started weaving with is bison or buffalo. But this is bison. And everyone thinks bison would be scratchy or coarse, and it's not. I'll pass this around and let you handle it. If you like a Great Pyrenees dog, they have the outer guard hairs that are kind of coarse, and underneath they have that soft loft, the second coat. That's how bison are, especially in winter. They have the outer guard hairs, but underneath they have that loft. So I buy my bison from a lady in Wyoming. She buys the hides up from the different branches. She pulls all the loft out, has it spun into yarn, and then she processes the hides where the mane is, the long shaggy hair on the mane. She processes those hides, and I buy those from her. And if you'll notice, there's one in my booth, my competition piece. I will trim the blankets and shawls with the actual mates, which gives them a little something unique. But it's so much softer than wool. And this is a diamond weave. This is what my granny was known for, was this diamond weave. It's a 14-step process, like the herringbone is a 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over, pretty simple. The diamond has 14 steps, 14 different for every diamond that you have to go through. If someone walks in while you're weaving and you're halfway through it and asks you a question, I can tell you it takes twice as long to take one out and find your spot. And if you get about 2 inches in and you're weaving wool and you find one little mistake, you have to take all of that out one at a time. The other thing that Granny was known for, as the blankets back then were a very, almost a plaid. I don't know who came up with the design, but it's a very basic plaid with borders on each end. They were, you'd have your predominant color, which would be red, and they would have the black borders. And the other weavers would put a white breaking thread. Well, Granny's, if they didn't specify it, she would put this bright lime green. And I remember when I was a teenager, I asked her why the green, and she said, well, that's your breaking thread. And she said, it's like when you have a fancy dinner and you have lime sherbet to cleanse your palate. Well, the lime green cleanses your palette in between your colors and, breaks and makes the colors fresh, which it does. Green is a natural, neutral color. The funny thing is, Granny grew up at Oak Hill. I don't know when she ever had a fancy dinner to know that, but it stuck with me. And didn't realize until a few years ago, actually I think it was when we were doing the OCO segment, we were looking at my stuff, And I have always used a turquoise, and it didn't even process with my brain that I was doing the same thing as Granny, but putting my own spin on green. So I guess I've carried it forward without even realizing it, but it does breaks up your colors. So let me pass these around. I'll just let you. Here, Mike. I'll put you to work. And then you can just handle the loft and feel the difference between the two. I make cards as something, little greeting cards. When I go to an art show, I want a memento of the show, something to remember the show by, but I can't afford to buy, a $2,000 piece from an artist. So I started making cards, and I make them on the big loom, make a big piece like this, and then I will sew a 4x6 square, cut them out, then adhere them inside a greeting card. And that gives everybody, for $25, you get a little piece of art, you get a little piece of history to take with you. And when I weave them, it's no rhyme or reason. I just start playing with color. I take all my scraps and whatever I find. And for me, it's a fun way to play with different color combinations before I make a big piece. So this is going to be stockings, Christmas stockings. So I made a pair of stockings last week, and they were red and black, very traditional. And I thought it would be fun to put some sheepskin. I think every generation has added something. So for me, I've started adding fur to my shawls. So I will line my shawls with the bison mane or with the sheepskin. So I made these stockings, and I thought I was going to put the sheepskin. Well, I remembered I had a reindeer hide. And my little twisted mind, I thought, wouldn't it be funny to make Santa stockings out of reindeer hide? And, I would be the only one that would think that was funny. And we were on Good Day Tulsa, and they showed them. And I had a lady show up first thing at the market yesterday and made a beeline because she wanted the reindeer stockings. So someone else has my twisted sense of humor that thought it was funny. So we're putting reindeer on this set too. People ask me a lot if I spin my own yarn, and I don't. I don't think I have the patience for it. I like big looms and big yarn. But I did dye some, and this is natural cotton. This is how it comes, with absolutely no color. And this is dyed with walnuts, with walnut hulls. The Cherokees use walnut dye a lot. So I dyed this, and this soaked for a week, a whole week in the summer in pure just walnut water, and then rinsed it, and still will only get this dark, but you will not get this color out, right? It will never come out. One thing different, since I do work with wool, people ask about, I had hand finishing or wet finishing, and that is a true art in itself. That adds a whole another level to weaving with natural fibers. When you weave with acrylic, you're done. Take it off the loom, you tie the fringe, and you're done. When you weave with wool, it has to be full to lock together. So when I take a blanket like this, once I tie the fringe, I get it off, and the process when you take it up. Before you tie the fringe, I inspect them for knots, and it's not uncommon in yarn to have a knot in the processing. There'll be a broken thread and I'll tie a knot. And in wool, you would never know. I could hide that, and I can't do it. My conscience, there's sometimes it's right before contest, and Granny's like right here going, you'll know. And so when it has a broken thread, and you put that on a needle and in and out every stitch all the way through the blanket until it's got a whole new thread all the way through it. And it has to be perfect or it will show up. So that's part of processing wool. Then I tie the fringe, and then the fooling starts. That's when I soak it in a natural suds, and it's to strip the spinning oils out of it and also over dye. So when you buy yarn, it'll say dye fast, but if you soak it in a little bit of warm water for about 20 minutes, it will come out really dark colored. And I want that in my water and not on a customer's white pants or, white leather. And if you've ever seen them walking wool, have you ever seen in the old England, especially, and Ireland, when they do the wool, and they will all be out on a table, and they will be walking wool with the wet blankets. This is how you full blanket, and it's just my hands in warm water, and it all has to be for about 20 minutes, just working this wool. And what that does is it loosens the fibers. So you've got several strands of wool twisted together. It loosens the fibers in the loft. From there, I put it in a tub with hair conditioner, natural hair conditioner, that softens everything up, and I can get it just a few degrees cooler, not much, just a few degrees. It starts pulling the fibers in. Then the third rinse is 20 minutes in vinegar water, and that strips everything out, all the conditioner and everything. What people don't know is vinegar is a wonderful hair conditioner. You think of vinegar as being astringent and harsh, but it makes everything so soft, strips everything out. So that is a cool rinse, and that's another 20 minute soak. What that does, that brings all the loft of the wool back together. So that's what makes this a wool blanket truly last generations. There's no space. You see, there's no space at all between the stitches, and that's what it does. It opens the thread up, and then it closes it back down and locks it in. So this isn't going to snag, and this isn't going to have holes in it. That adds. It takes me 22 hours to thread the loom, weave the blanket, and then there's another good 6 hours just in wet finishing. From there, you have to wring it out, then it has to dry flat, and then it's a hard steam press. It all has to be locked down with a steam press. So that's the wet finishing part of it. So a diamond, like I said, a herringbone is 1, 2, 3, 4 over and over. A diamond weave is 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there's a skip in there, and it seems like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not, but there's a skip, and that skip is what opens and closes your diamond. So every diamond is 14 steps. Yes. When you're weaving your patterns, you get in the zone, and you just, like I said, I've been doing this a few years, but you just get in the zone and go. But you can also create your own designs by doing it. So I was playing around with one, just going back and forth. It's almost like a piano in a way, just going back and forth. And it made almost a wildflower design, and they look like a little wildflower. So on some of mine, there is a hidden wildflower. If I remember, I will put a hidden wildflower in. Maybe it's on this. One of these making cards, I was playing around. Oh, it is. This right here. Can you see this little up and down in the middle of this blue right here? See this little pattern that goes in and out? That was something I was playing with. Still haven't figured out how to do that again. So if any volunteers want to figure this out for me. People ask me where these designs come from, and they come from our basket weavings. The basket weavings are even older than our loom weavings and our hand weavings. And the diamonds and the chevrons and everything are just carried over into our weavings, the same patterns. And these looms, so these looms are about 85 years old now. And when I got them, they had baling wire on them, and these are precious to me, and I couldn't understand how Grandpa would put baling wire on these precious looms. And when you've got a competition and it's due the next day and something breaks, like this just popped, you will fix them with anything to keep them going. People ask what I enjoy making. I probably sell more blankets than anything, and I think because they're traditional, people, and it's you can use them, you can put them on the wall. My brother has them hanging on our family gigs, which looks cool. Our family were fish giggers, so it's hanging on the gigs. They're probably not my favorite to weave because they're slow. I'm short. I don't know if you notice that or not, a little bit short. And when a loom's almost 6 foot wide, it's stopping and reaching and pushing it through just a foot at a time. So it's very time consuming, and I like to do things fast. So the shawls, and these are more traditional colors, but the shawls are all right here. And I can get this loom singing. I can play with wild colors. But my newest thing is to put rayon silk fringe. And they are, it's fuchsia, bright magenta. It is an attention getter. So that's the most fun things to make are the shawls.